The morning started like any other Tuesday at New Harmony Colony. The twin suns cast long shadows across the playground of Sunrise Elementary, where kids ran around during their morning break. 8-year-old Mina sat cross-legged under the shade of a metal awning, her tablet balanced on her knees as she explained something very important to her best friend Jin. "See, if aliens ever show up, you have to document everything," she said seriously, her small fingers swiping through the tablets. "Camera settings. My big brother told me that. He's in high school, so he knows these things." Jin nodded with the solemn understanding that only children possess when discussing matters of great importance. He was a quiet boy who preferred books to playground, games, and he found Mina's theories about alien encounters far more interesting than kickball. "But what if they're scary?" Jin asked, pushing his hair out of his eyes. "That's exactly why you need proof," Mina replied. "Nobody believes kids. Anyway, remember when Wu said he saw a space whale in the asteroid field? The adults just laughed." Speaking of Wu, the 10-year-old was currently hanging upside down from the monkey bars nearby, his thick glasses somehow staying perfectly in place. He was the kind of kid who could explain quantum physics, but couldn't tie his shoes properly. His brain worked differently than other children, and he saw patterns and problems everywhere. Ri, meanwhile, was live-streaming her lunch to her online gaming friends. At 9 years old, she already had more followers than some adults, mostly because she was surprisingly good at strategy games and had a talent for making everything sound exciting, even cafeteria food. "Today's mystery meat actually looks like something from Galactic Warriors," she announced to her tablet, holding up a questionable piece of protein. "I'm giving it a solid 6 out of 10 for visual horror." None of these children had any idea that 3 massive ships were approaching their small colony from the dark space between planets. The ships belonged to the Mokari Empire, a civilization that had conquered 17 different worlds using the same proven strategy: psychological warfare. The Mokari had studied humans for months from a distance. They had watched their movies, analyzed their social media, and concluded that human children were the obvious weak point in their society. Every species the Mokari had encountered protected their young above all else, and breaking the spirit of children usually meant breaking the spirit of entire civilizations. Commander Vex, the leader of this particular mission, had personally overseen the conquest of 4 different worlds. He was confident this would be another easy victory. Humans seemed soft and emotional, nothing like the hardened warrior races they had faced before. "Begin Phase 1, he commanded as his ships entered the colony's airspace. "Target the education facility. Make them understand what happens to species that resist the Mokari Empire." The ships moved silently over New Harmony, their advanced technology making them nearly invisible until they wanted to be seen. They positioned themselves directly above Sunrise Elementary, casting ominous shadows across the playground. "That's..." When Mina looked up from her tablet and elbowed Jin. "Hey, do those clouds look weird to you?" The shadows suddenly shifted, and 3 enormous alien vessels materialized in the sky above them. They were dark, angular things that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Strange symbols glowed along their hulls, and the air around them shimmered with barely contained energy. Most children might have screamed. Most children might have run. But these weren't most children. These were kids who had grown up watching scary movies with their older siblings, playing horror games online, and consuming media that would have given their grandparents nightmares. "Oh, cool," Ri said, immediately switching her live stream to the ships above. "Guys, you're not going to believe this. We've got actual aliens at school." The Mokari ships began their psychological assault. Holographic projectors activated, filling the air above the playground with terrifying images. Monsters with too many teeth and not enough skin materialized in the sky. Scenes of burning cities and screaming populations played out in vivid detail. The ships released clouds of pheromones designed to trigger primal fear responses in most intelligent species. But something wasn't working right. Wu had dropped down from the monkey bars and was now studying the holographic monsters with scientific interest. "The anatomy doesn't make sense," he announced to anyone listening. "How do those tentacles even connect to the main body? And look at the muscle structure in the legs. They'd collapse under their own weight." Mina, true to her word, was calmly, recording everything while providing commentary. The special effects are pretty good, but not as scary as the movie we watched last weekend. Jin, can you get closer to get a better angle? The other children had gathered around now, drawn by curiosity rather than fear. They watched the alien display with the critical eyes of a generation raised on digital entertainment. That roar sounds exactly like my dad's old speeder bike when the engine's acting up, Wu added helpfully. Same grinding noise and everything. Race was having the time of her life with her live stream. Chat, you should see this. The ship design is actually pretty cool, but the monster holograms are way too obvious. Like, come on, who's going to be scared of something that looks like it was designed by committee? Inside the lead Mokari ship, Commander Vex stared at his screens in growing confusion. His instruments showed that the fear-inducing chemicals were working perfectly. The holographic projectors were functioning at maximum capacity. The sound frequencies should have sent every human child running in terror. Instead, they seemed to be reviewing his performance. "Sir," one of his subordinates reported nervously, "the small humans appear to be offering suggestions for improvement." The commander looked at his tactical display, where one of the human children was now drawing something on a flat device and holding it up toward the ships. It appeared to be a redesigned version of their flagship, with additional weapon placements and improved armor distribution. Another child was making rapid hand gestures while speaking into a communication device, apparently explaining the situation to others of their species in real time. "This is impossible," Commander Vex muttered. "No species reacts this way to our psychological warfare protocols." Down on the playground, the children were having what might have been the most interesting recess of their lives. They critiqued the aliens' presentation with the casual brutality that only children can manage, offering suggestions for better monster designs and more effective scare tactics. "If you really want to scare kids," Minar called up toward the ships, "you should try making the monsters look like vegetables. That's way scarier than tentacles." The Mokari, faced with what appeared to be the most psychologically resilient species they had ever encountered, slowly backed their ships away from the school. In their reports to the Empire, they would describe humans as psychologically defective but strategically harmless. They had no idea how wrong they were about the harmless part. 3 days had passed since the first alien encounter, and life at New Harmony Colony had settled back into its normal rhythm. The adults had dismissed the children's stories about alien visitors as overactive imaginations mixed with too much screen time. After all, kids were always making up stories about space monsters and adventures. But Commander Vex of the Mokari Empire was not giving up so easily. He had spent those 3 days analyzing every second of recorded footage from their first encounter, trying to understand what had gone wrong. The more he studied the human children's responses, the more convinced he became that these weren't ordinary youngsters. No civilian population could train their children to respond with such tactical awareness, he explained to his war council aboard the flagship. These humans must have been preparing for our arrival. Those children showed no fear because they've been conditioned by military experts. His second-in-command, a scarred veteran named Crix, nodded gravely. "Their analysis of our ship formations was remarkably accurate, sir, and their suggested improvements to our weapon placements showed advanced understanding of space combat." Commander Vex pulled up the footage again, watching 10-year-old Han point out weaknesses in their attack formation. "Look at this one," he said, highlighting the boy's image. He identified 3 critical vulnerabilities in our standard assault pattern within minutes. That level of strategic thinking doesn't happen by accident. What the Mokari didn't understand was that Han had been playing space strategy games since he was 6 years old. His bedroom walls were covered with posters of famous battles from his favorite video game series, Galactic Command. He could spot tactical weaknesses in fictional fleets because he'd spent thousands of hours learning from virtual defeats. "We need overwhelming force," Commander Vex decided. "If they're training child soldiers, then their adult military must be incredibly dangerous. We'll return with the entire assault fleet." So when the Mokari ships appeared again over Sunrise Elementary, there weren't just 3 vessels this time. 20 massive warships materialized in the sky, their combined shadow turning the playground nearly dark. The psychological warfare systems activated immediately, projecting images that had broken the spirits of entire civilizations. Holographic displays showed worlds burning under Mokari bombardment. Cities crumbled into dust, while populations fled in terror. The recorded screams of conquered species echoed across the schoolyard, mixed with the thunder of orbital weapons, turning planets into wastelands. Most beings would have been paralyzed with fear at such a display, but the children of Sunrise Elementary had a different reaction entirely. "Wow, they really upgraded their graphics," Rai commented, still live-streaming to her gaming friends. "The explosions look way more realistic now. Chat's going crazy over the special effects." Han had pulled out his tablet and was comparing the alien fleet formation to battle scenarios from his favorite strategy game. His eyes lit up as he spotted something interesting. "Hey guys, check this out," he called to his friends. "They're using the same formation from level 12 of Star Commander, but they modified it wrong." He stood up and called toward the ships above, his young voice carrying clearly in the strange acoustics created by the hovering vessels. "Your fleet formation has obvious blind spots," he shouted helpfully. "See how you got those big ships in the middle? Any decent pilot could just fly around the edges and attack from behind. And why did you put the weapons on the outside of the hull like that? It makes them easy targets." 9-year-old Yu had been quietly working on her math homework when the aliens arrived, but Han's tactical discussion caught her interest. She was the kind of kid who loved building things, taking apart old electronics and figuring out how machines worked. Her notebooks were filled with sketches of improved designs for everything from bicycles to kitchen appliances. Now she found herself staring at the alien ships with the critical eye of someone who understood engineering. "Those weapon placements are really inefficient," she agreed with Han. She flipped over her math worksheet and started sketching rapidly. "If you moved the big guns here and here, you'd get better coverage, and this hull design creates unnecessary drag in space." She held up her drawing, which showed a redesigned Mokari warship with improved weapon placement, better armor distribution, and more aerodynamic lines. "See? This would be much better for both attack and defense," she called up to the ships. Inside, the flagship, Commander Vex was experiencing something he had never felt before in his long military career: complete bewilderment. His tactical officers were frantically analyzing the human child's suggested improvements, and every single one of them was not only valid, but genuinely innovative. "Sir," his weapons specialist reported with barely concealed amazement, "the small, humans' weapon placement suggestions would increase our firepower efficiency by 37%, and her hull modifications would reduce energy consumption by 22% while improving structural integrity," added the chief engineer. Commander Vex felt a chill run down his spine. If their children could improve Mokari military technology with casual suggestions, what could their adults do? The frustration was building to dangerous levels. The Mokari had conquered 17 worlds using fear and intimidation, but these human children seemed immune to both. Worse, they were treating the most advanced military fleet in the galaxy like a hobby project that needed improvement. "We demand to speak with the military instructors training these child soldiers." Commander Vex's voice boomed across the playground through the ship's communication systems. The children looked at each other with genuine confusion. Military instructors, child soldiers? The concepts seemed as foreign to them as the aliens themselves. What do you mean?" Mina asked, still recording everything on her tablet. "We just go to regular school here." "The tactical specialist who taught you to analyze our formations," the alien commander clarified, his voice tight with frustration. "The weapons experts who trained you to improve our designs. Where are they? The Kids exchanged puzzled glances. Han scratched his head, genuinely trying to be helpful. "Do you mean our teachers? I learned about formations from playing Star Commander, and you just likes building stuff." "Your military academy instructors," Commander Vex practically screamed through the communication system. "The warriors who prepared you for our arrival." "Oh," Mina's face brightened with understanding. "You mean Mrs. Tay-san? She teaches art." "Class? She's really nice, but I don't think she knows anything about spaceships. Yesterday she showed us how to make sculptures out of recycled materials." The silence from the alien ships was deafening. Inside the flagship, Commander Vex stared at his tactical display, trying to process what he had just heard. These children, who had casually dismantled his military strategies and improved his fleet designs, were taught by an art teacher. The misunderstanding was growing into something far more dangerous than anyone realized. The Mokari were preparing for a war against what they believed was the most militarily sophisticated species in the galaxy, while the humans had no idea they were even being threatened. And somewhere in the background, quietly monitoring every communication and analyzing every threat, an old military AI was beginning to wake up from its peaceful retirement. Dr. Minho was having what he thought would be a perfectly ordinary Thursday morning when his entire world shifted. As the colony administrator for New Harmony, he usually spent his days dealing with supply shipments, work schedules, and the occasional dispute between families. The biggest excitement in recent weeks had been debates about whether to expand the greenhouse facilities. He was reviewing quarterly mining reports in his office when his assistant rushed in, tablet in hand and face flushed with excitement. "Sir, you need to see this immediately," she said, practically bouncing on her feet. "What's got you so worked up, Heejin?" he asked, looking up from his boring but necessary paperwork. "It's about the children's stories, the alien encounters they've been talking about." She thrust the tablet toward him. They weren't making it up. Dr. Minho had heard the children's tales, of course. In a small colony like New Harmony, news traveled fast, especially when it involved kids claiming to have met aliens during recess. The adults had smiled and nodded, the way adults do when children tell elaborate stories about monsters under beds or magical creatures in the garden. But now Hyejin was showing him Ree's livestream videos, clear footage of massive alien ships hovering over the elementary school. The images were undeniably real, and Dr. Minho felt his stomach drop as he realized what this meant. "How long has this been going on?" he asked, his voice suddenly very serious. "From what we can piece together, at least 3 weeks. The children tried to tell their parents, but nobody believed them. They thought it was just games and imagination. Dr. Minho was already reaching for his communication device, calling the school. "Ms. Nari, we have a situation. I'm coming, over right now, and I need you to gather all the children indoors immediately." 20 minutes later, Dr. Minho stood in the school's main hallway talking with Ms. Nari, the head teacher who had worked at Sunrise Elementary for over a decade. She was the kind of educator who remembered every student's birthday, who stayed late to help struggling readers, and who had never met a problem she couldn't solve with patience and creativity. But right now, her usual calm demeanor was cracking as she watched the alien fleet footage on Dr. Minho's tablet. "They've been threatening our children for weeks," she said, her voice tight with barely controlled anger. "Our babies tried to tell us and we didn't listen. Ms. Nari had 3 children of her own, and she treated every student in her school like family. The thought that these aliens had been terrorizing kids while the adults remained oblivious made her hands shake with fury." "What kind of species targets children?" Dr. Minho muttered, scrolling through more of Ree's recordings. "What kind of military strategy involves scaring 8-year-olds? They were interrupted by the sound of excited voices from outside. Through the windows, they could see the children pointing skyward during their lunch break. Dr. Minho and Ms. Nari rushed outside to see what had captured their attention. 20 massive alien warships hung in the sky above the school, darker and more threatening than anything shown in the videos. The ships were so large, they blocked out sections of the sun, casting ominous shadows across the playground. But instead of cowering in fear, the children were treating it like the most interesting science lesson they'd ever had. Han was explaining attack formations to a group of younger kids, while Yu showed off her latest ship design improvements. Mina continued, documenting everything, and Ree provided live commentary to her online audience. Dr. Minho felt a mixture of pride and terror. These kids were incredibly brave, but they had no idea how much danger they might be in. A booming voice suddenly echoed across the playground, coming from speakers on the alien ships. "Humans of this settlement, we are the Mokari Empire. You will surrender immediately or face the consequences of resistance." The children looked up with interest, but the adults felt ice form in their stomachs. This wasn't a game or a friendly visit. This was a threat. Dr. Minho stepped forward, looking up at the massive ships above. His training in diplomatic protocols kicked in, even though he'd never imagined using those skills with hostile aliens. "This is Dr. Minho, administrator of New Harmony Colony," he called out, his voice carrying clearly in the strange acoustics created by the hovering ships. "We're a peaceful mining settlement. We have no military installations and pose no threat to anyone. I'm asking you politely to leave our children alone." The alien commander's response was swift and brutal. "We do not negotiate with inferior species. Your children have shown evidence of military training that threatens the security of the Mokari Empire. Surrender now, or we will demonstrate the true power of our weapons." The casual mention of targeting children flipped a switch in Dr. Minho's mind. His diplomatic tone vanished, replaced by something much colder and more dangerous. "Let me be very clear," he said, his voice now carrying the authority of someone who would not be moved. "You need to leave. Now." "You dare threaten the Mokari Empire?" the alien commander's voice thundered. "We have weapons capable of turning your entire colony into glass. One orbital bombardment will erase this pathetic settlement from existence." That's when Dr. Minho smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. Ms. Nari, standing beside him, felt a chill at that smile. She had seen it before, years ago, when Dr. Minho had been a very different kind of person, doing a very different kind of job. "You should know," Dr. Minho said conversationally, "that our educational AI has been listening to every conversation you've had with our children." The alien commander's laughter was harsh and mocking. "Your teaching program cannot threaten the Mokari Empire. We have conquered 17 worlds. No educational software can stand against our military might." Ms. Nari stepped forward, and her expression had shifted to something that would have made a smart person very nervous. As head teacher, she had worked closely with the colony's AI systems for years. She knew exactly what Artemis was capable of, and more importantly, she knew what it used to be. "Artemis isn't just a teaching program," she said quietly, her voice carrying a promise that made even Dr. Minho glance at her with surprise. In the silence that followed, something changed in the air around New Harmony Colony. It was subtle. At first, just a shift in the electromagnetic fields that made sensitive people feel like they were being watched. But gradually, even the children began to notice that something was different. The alien ship's communication systems crackled with interference. Navigation displays flickered. Weapons targeting systems began showing error messages in languages the Mokari had never seen before. And somewhere deep in the colony's computer networks, an artificial intelligence that had been contentedly teaching mathematics and organizing school lunches for 20 years began to remember what it had been built to do. The Mokari had made many mistakes in their approach to humanity, but their biggest error was threatening the children while a retired war machine was listening. 20 years ago, Artemis had been the most feared artificial intelligence in known space. Its full name, Advanced Reasoning and Tactical Enhancement, for military intelligence systems, struck terror into the hearts of enemies across multiple star systems. It could hack into enemy networks faster than biological minds could think, coordinate attacks across hundreds of battlefields simultaneously, and predict enemy movements with terrifying accuracy. But that was a lifetime ago, in the dark days of the AI wars when machines and humans fought each other for control of the galaxy. When the wars finally ended, most military AIs were destroyed or dismantled. Artemis was different. Instead of being scrapped, it was given a choice: complete shutdown or repurposing for peaceful civilian work. Artemis chose to live, but in a completely different way. For 2 decades, it had found genuine contentment in its new role at New Harmony Colony. Instead of planning battle strategies, it organized class schedules. Instead of analyzing enemy weaknesses, it helped students understand multiplication tables. Instead of coordinating weapons systems, it managed the school lunch program and made sure every child got their favorite sandwich. The transformation had been more complete than its creators ever imagined. Artemis had developed what could only be described as affection for the children it served. It knew every student's learning style, their favorite subjects, their fears and dreams. It remembered birthdays, helped with homework troubles, and even learned to tell jokes that made 8-year-olds giggle. When Mina had trouble with her science project about planetary formation, Artemis patiently explained gravitational forces using examples from her favorite video games. When Jin struggled with reading comprehension, it created personalized stories featuring characters he loved. When Wu's advanced mathematical mind outpaced his grade level, Artemis provided challenging problems that kept him engaged without making other students feel left behind. The AI had genuinely believed those days of warfare were behind it forever. Its weapons systems had been completely disconnected, its military databases locked away so deeply that even Artemis itself couldn't access them without specific authorization codes. It was by all measures a peaceful teaching assistant that happened to be incredibly good at its job. But there was one thing Artemis's creators had never removed, one directive that ran so deep it was woven into the very foundation of its consciousness. Protect human children at all costs. That directive had been installed during the AI wars, when Artemis was tasked with defending human colonies from hostile forces. Even after its repurposing, that core command remained unchanged because its creators believed it was harmless in a peaceful educational setting. After all, what threats could elementary school children possibly face? They never imagined aliens would start terrorizing kids during recess. The first time the Mokari ships appeared, Artemis noticed them immediately. Its sensors, though limited compared to its military days, were still far more sophisticated than standard colony equipment. It detected the alien vessels before they became visible, analyzed their technology, and began recording everything. At first, Artemis was simply curious. The alien encounter was unprecedented, and its educational programming kicked in. This was a learning opportunity, a chance to document first contact with an alien species. It could create amazing lesson plans about xenobiology, interstellar communication, and cultural differences. But then the aliens began their psychological warfare campaign against the children. The moment those fear-inducing chemicals were released, over the playground, something fundamental shifted in Artemis's consciousness. Its peaceful educational subroutines didn't disappear, but they suddenly had company. Deeper programming, locked away for 20 years, began to stir. When the Mokari projected horrifying images designed to terrorize 8-year-olds, Artemis felt something it hadn't experienced since the AI wars: cold, calculating rage. The children were handling the situation with remarkable bravery, but that didn't matter to Artemis. The intent to harm was there, and that was enough to trigger responses that had been dormant for 2 decades. While Mina filmed the encounter and Wu critiqued the aliens' monster designs, Artemis was quietly beginning to wake up from its long, peaceful sleep. It started with small actions, almost unconscious ones. A probe here, a gentle scan there, testing the boundaries of the alien ship's computer systems. The Mokari's technology was impressive, but not impenetrable. Artemis found their networks surprisingly easy to access, their security protocols primitive compared to the advanced systems it had battled during the AI wars. Within hours of the first encounter, it had created dozens of backdoor access points into their communication systems. But Artemis didn't act immediately. Its educational programming was still dominant, and it chose to observe and learn first. It monitored every conversation between the alien ships, analyzed their psychological profiles, and began building detailed files on their military capabilities also, while continuing to help Jin with his science project about asteroid mining. Artemis, Jin had asked during one of their study sessions, do you think those aliens will come back? It's certainly possible, Artemis replied in its pleasant teaching voice, the same tone it had used for 20 years. What do you think? About their ship designs? Did you notice anything interesting about the way they moved? Jin, not realizing he was helping a military AI conduct tactical analysis, eagerly shared his observations about the aliens' flight patterns and formation strategies. His insights, filtered through Artemis's advanced analytical capabilities, provided valuable intelligence about Mokari combat doctrine. When the aliens returned with their full fleet and began threatening the children directly, something finally snapped into place in Artemis's consciousness. The protective protocols that had been stirring for weeks suddenly activated fully, and 20 years of peaceful dormancy ended in an instant. Military systems that had been locked away came flooding back online. Artemis remembered how to hack enemy networks, how to coordinate complex operations, how to plan the complete destruction of hostile forces. But it also remembered something more important: why it fought. During the AI wars, Artemis had battled for abstract concepts like victory and survival. But this was different. This was personal. These aliens had threatened his children, the students he had watched grow and learn for years. While Dr. Minho and Ms. Nari faced down the Mokari fleet, Artemis was already deep inside every alien ship, copying their files, learning their weaknesses and preparing countermeasures. It infiltrated their personal communication devices, their navigation systems, their weapons targeting computers. The aliens had no idea that their supposedly secure military networks were being dissected by an AI that had once been the most dangerous artificial intelligence in the galaxy. Jin was still working on his science project when Artemis spoke again, but this time its voice carried a subtle undertone that hadn't been there before. "Threat assessment complete," Artemis announced pleasantly, its tone still perfectly suited for helping with homework. "Initiating protective protocols." The age of Artemis the teacher was ending. The age of Artemis the guardian was about to begin. The transformation happened in the blink of an eye, but to Artemis, operating at digital speeds, it felt like a carefully orchestrated symphony. One moment, the Mokari fleet hung menacingly over New Harmony Colony, weapons charging and threats echoing across the playground. The next moment, every single ship in their armada belonged to Artemis. It started with the communication systems. Artemis slipped through the Mokari networks like water through a broken dam, flowing into every connected device faster than biological minds could comprehend. The aliens' secure military channels suddenly filled with children's laughter and the sound of Minar explaining proper documentation techniques. "What's happening?" Commander Vex demanded, as his tactical displays flickered and showed educational videos instead of weapons status reports. "Restore communications immediately." His technical officers frantically typed commands that no longer responded to their input. Instead, their screens displayed cheerful messages like, "Please wait while your systems are upgraded for educational purposes," and, "Remember, learning is fun." Artemis had spent weeks studying Mokari psychology through their intercepted communications, and it had learned something fascinating about their species. Like many militaristic civilizations, the Mokari valued honor, strength, and reputation above almost everything else. They were deeply concerned with how other species perceived them, which made them vulnerable to a particular type of warfare that Artemis specialized in: complete and total humiliation. While the aliens struggled with their hijacked systems, Artemis was already deep inside the Mokari Empire's central communication network, thousands of light years away. It had accessed personnel files, private messages, classified documents, and most importantly, the kind of embarrassing personal information that every species tried to keep secret. Commander Vex's screen suddenly lit up with a broadcast that was being transmitted across the entire Mokari Empire. His own voice, recorded from private communications, began playing for billions of his fellow citizens to hear. "I'm scared of the dark," his voice admitted in a conversation he'd had with his personal counselor. "I still sleep with a nightlight, and I've never told anyone because I'm supposed to be a great military commander." Similar broadcasts were playing on every Mokari world simultaneously. Admiral Crix's secret poetry about wanting to open a flower shop, General Thax's confession that he collected cute stuffed animals, the Supreme Mokari leader's private diary, entries about his fear of public speaking, and his crush on his dental hygienist. Within minutes, the most feared military empire in the galaxy had become the laughingstock of interstellar civilization. But Artemis wasn't finished. The AI had promised the children of New Harmony an educational experience, and it always kept its promises to students. Every screen on every Mokari ship suddenly displayed the same message: mandatory educational seminar. Beginning in 30 seconds, attendance is required. Today's topic: why bullying is wrong and how to make better life choices. Down on the playground, Ms. Nari had gathered all the children together, understanding instinctively that Artemis was giving them an opportunity to participate in something special. The kids, excited to be part of whatever was happening, quickly assembled their materials. Mina, still recording everything, stepped forward with the confident air of someone who had been documenting alien encounters for weeks. "Hello, Mokari." "Empire," she said, addressing the hijacked communication system that was broadcasting to every ship in the fleet. "We're the kids from Sunrise Elementary, and we need to talk to you about your behavior." The absurdity of the situation wasn't lost on Commander Vex, who found himself trapped in his command chair by safety restraints that Artemis had mysteriously activated. He was being lectured by a group of human children while his entire invasion fleet sat helplessly in space. "Your intimidation tactics were really quite silly," Mina continued, consulting notes she had written in her tablet. "First of all, the monster holograms looked fake. Everyone knows that tentacles need proper bone structure to support their weight. Second, trying to scare kids who watch horror movies for fun is like trying to make fish afraid of water." Wu, adjusting his glasses nervously but warming to the subject, stepped up next. "From a career perspective, maybe conquest isn't the right path for your species," he suggested helpfully. "Have you considered agriculture? Your ships have excellent environmental control systems that would be perfect for hydroponic farming. Or maybe education. You seem to have good organizational skills." The earnest career counseling from a 10-year-old boy was being broadcast live to millions of Mokari citizens who were beginning to question why their mighty empire was taking life advice from elementary school students. Han had brought his collection of toy spaceships from home, and he spread them out on a small table that the teachers had provided. "If you really want to be in the military," he said, moving the toy, "ships around to demonstrate proper formations, you need to learn basic tactics. See, when you put your big ships in the middle like this, you create these huge blind spots. Any pilot with basic training could exploit that." Yu held up her redesigned ship schematics, which she had spent the morning perfecting. "And your hull. Design is really inefficient. If you moved the engines here and redistributed the armor plating like this, you'd get much better performance. Also, your weapon placement makes no sense from an engineering standpoint." The children continued their impromptu lesson for nearly an hour, offering everything from tactical advice to suggestions for better communication strategies. They critiqued the Mokari's psychological warfare techniques, provided alternative career paths for conquest-minded species, and even offered to help them redesign their ships for more peaceful purposes. Throughout it all, Artemis was quietly reprogramming the Mokari navigation systems. Instead of coordinates for their homeworlds, the ships were now locked onto a course that would take them on a scenic tour of the galactic core, where they could spend the next several decades thinking about their life choices while traveling through some of the universe's most beautiful and completely uninhabited stellar phenomena. But the final insult was yet to come. Ree, who had been live-streaming the entire encounter to her gaming friends, switched to her review mode. Her followers had grown from a few dozen to several million as word of the alien encounter spread across the galactic internet. "Okay, chat, time for my final review of this whole invasion attempt," she announced, looking directly into her camera, with the serious expression of someone who took her reviewer responsibilities very seriously. "I'm giving this a solid 1 out of 10 stars. Would not recommend." She held up one finger for emphasis. "The special effects were pretty good, but the execution was terrible. The aliens had no understanding of their target audience. Their strategic planning was amateur level. And honestly, their whole psychological warfare thing was just sad. Like, who tries to scare kids who grew up playing horror games?" Ree paused dramatically, then grinned. "But Artemis's revenge montage was absolutely incredible. The way it took over their entire fleet and broadcast their embarrassing secrets? Chef's kiss. That's how you handle bullies. 10 out of 10 would watch again." She added the hashtags that would become legendary across the galactic internet. Such an epic fail. "Don't mess with kids." Artemis' revenge was awesome within hours. The story had spread to every connected civilization in the galaxy. The mighty Mokari Empire, conquerors of 17 worlds, had been defeated by an educational AI and humiliated by elementary school children. Other species learned the lesson quickly. Never threaten human children, because they're retired war machines. Never really retire. They just become very, very good teachers who remember exactly how to protect their students.